Welcome, Flosstubers. My name is Laura Nicole from Firecrakr Projects. This is my first official Flosstube video. This is the second taping of this same Flosstube video, so I will tell you more about that in a little bit. I have wanted to do a cross-stitch video and talk about cross-stitch Afghan fabric, and I've wanted to do that probably since January of 2015, and I finally had enough time here in April 2016 to apparently do this video a couple times. So just to give you a little information about my cross-stitching, I started cross-stitching probably when I was about 15, yesterday. And in 2011, I decided to start stitching pretty much full-time. So I stitch a little bit every week at least. I don't necessarily stitch every day, but sometimes I stitch every day, like 4 or 5 hours a day. But that doesn't happen all the time, or most of the time, or when I want to, because I have to have a job because my family needs to eat. So my cross-stitching Afghan journey began in 2012 when I went to visit a good friend of mine in Michigan. I, of course, being the good cross-stitcher, brought some projects to do with me on the trip. They were small, but full coverage type of things, so had lots of work to do. And my friend had done some cross-stitching as a teenager here and there, but she's not really a cross-stitcher, and had a pattern that she had bought many years before that she thought was cute and wanted to do. So she was trying to do that project and thought I could help. No, I was not any help. Not at all. I thought I could be helpful. I wasn't helpful. So at the end of the time of me being in Michigan, I inherited her project, fabric and all. So it is the Precious Moments ABC Baby Collection. This is the third printing of this pattern. There are several different types of letter orientation in this pattern. So one letter orientation is this block of letters where the letters are sort of blocked together. That's sort of like a sampler pattern that you see normally. And then this type of sampler pattern has the letters going around the outside of the Afghan. There's just little blocks. Instead of the blocks being all together, the blocks are around the outside, and there's a central picture. So I inherited the fabric to do this lovely, the blocks that go around the outside, there's a central picture. So I was excited. I thought, since I have been cross-stitching longer and on varied projects, that I could make it look a little better, and that some problems I thought she was having with the stitches not looking even, I could compensate for, and I could figure out the thread tension, and I can make them look really great. So I got home and I whipped this baby out. Here is that fabric that originally came with it. Now originally, she bought this pattern in Louisiana, where she grew up, at a local needlework store, I believe, and the people at the store purchased, the people at the store helped her pick out the fabric needed for this pattern. And if you look at the back of this pattern where it shows this orientation of fabric, it's called the Alphabet Afghan. If you're looking for this orientation of Afghan fabric, is actually called Alphabet Afghan fabric, pretty much. Different companies have their own spin on it, but a lot of them incorporate that in some way in the title. And in the description, it tells you need alphabet Afghan with parentheses 9 count, finished size approximately 54 by 60. And I gotta tell you, I do read my pattern instructions. I don't usually read them like a Bible, like this is things I must do. I read it more like a suggestion, and I sort of wing it from there. So I thought I had the right kind of fabric. I paid no mind to any of that information and went right along to try to stitch the alphabet Afghan. The pattern does say over 2, but I had never done over 2. I had never worked on linen. I should call this my never project. As we get into the stitching part of this, I will tell you I have never. So I have never stitched on linen. I have never stitched over 2. And this fabric asks you to do both things. So I decided I was going to just do over 1 and wing it. And I started the A, and it looked a hot mess. The problem she was having just came through in my stitching as well. That it was just uneven and looked awful and like a hot mess. So I frogged that, which I put probably a couple hours into it and a couple hours of frogging. Then I tried it over 2. And as I'm doing it over 2, I get a couple hours into this and realize the pattern is going to be bigger than my stitchable space. I don't know if you can see that, but my stitchable space is not big enough for this pattern over 2. And I couldn't figure out what was the problem. Now, I thought maybe this was 9 count fabric, but the holes aren't far enough apart, so that couldn't be. Couldn't quite figure out what was the problem. And so I went online to look for Afghan fabric. And they have several different types of Afghan fabric. So for this orientation that's in a block pattern, they have this fabric right here, which is Ann cloth. It has 2 woven in borders that go between the letters out to each side. And that's the Ann cloth for this bunched up version of this Afghan. And then they also had this tabby cloth napkin, Afghan. Tabby cloth Afghan, and it has a blue line that goes between the letters. That's woven in there. That's not something you actually stitch. This particular pattern has another outside border that you stitch yourself. So I assume this type of orientation of Afghan comes in different sizes, maybe different count sizes. I looked last night and I saw different colors. You don't just have to do the cream or white like this pattern shows. But I've never stitched on those type of Afghan fabrics, so I don't know how it stitches up and some things to look for when buying, other than the things I mentioned was the difference between tabby cloth and Ann cloth. But this alphabet type of orientation of Afghan, I looked and it appeared like this was the only type of fabric. I would go on to different sites. I think I went to ABC Stitch Therapy. I think I went to 123 Stitch. I think I went to Joann's. And it appeared like, because they pretty much just said alphabet Afghan. No count size. Beyond that, because I read the pattern as you need to do this on 9 count fabric over 2 because it says 9 count. So I tried again thinking there's only one type of alphabet Afghan. I have it. So I must be crazy and doing something totally wrong. And considering this is my first Afghan, you could see how I thought this has to be me. And once again, it turns out that nope, it's not right. So all of these hours I'm spending, hours and hours, I'm spending doing this. My husband, and those of you with a partner or who are married have probably had this situation, is around me. I don't have a stitch room. I stitch in front of the TV. He's there. He has seen this pattern a couple times. So as I'm talking to him about it and saying, I don't really know why this is happening. And they say there's only one type of Afghan fabric, but there has to be something wrong with this. He looks at, on this pattern, the finished approximate size. Okay? And he says, it says 54 by 60. This fabric is nowhere near 54 by 60. And I said, you have to be wrong. I think there was just a big part of me that was saying, I know I didn't spend all these hours and hours on this darn Afghan and it be wrong fabric. And my friend also spent hours trying to do this pattern on this fabric. So people have spent hours trying to create this Afghan on this fabric, so it has to be correct. So I went and measured, and lo and behold, my husband is right. I don't know why he couldn't have been right 3 or 4 times of me trying this previously, but he chose that time to be right. And so this time, when I looked online, I looked at the finished approximate size of Afghans. And I purchased an Afghan that met that description. Now, so when it came in the mail, you can see it is a whole lot bigger. I should have known in the beginning it was the wrong Afghan. This Afghan fabric on Joann's, I will link to it below in the description, is actually called Baby Alphabet Afghan Fabric. Sort of makes sense considering you can tell this pattern is for a baby sampler. There's a name and a date of birth. So I'm thinking everybody just assumed you would use the Baby Alphabet Afghan fabric. Nope. You don't want that for this particular pattern because the stitchable size in each block is not big enough for the way the pattern is written. Now I say it like that because I know some of you floss tubers out there are going to comment and say, oh, I can have made it work, and I'm sure you can, but there takes a whole lot of trying and manipulating each 45 by 45 block to look right, oriented with each other and oriented in the block. And also, there's lots of fractional stitches, and I tried to do the fractional stitches on this fabric, which I don't know the count of because I never had the original packaging of this. So, and it seemed impossible. I know some of you guys might be able to do it, but it would be a pain in the ever-loving neck to do. And this pattern is fractional stitch heavy. We'll talk more about that. So, once I got the correct alphabet Afghan, I feel like there should now be like angels singing. Okay, so I realized that, first of all, this is 18 count. So when purchasing any type of cross-stitch Afghan fabric, I recommend that you look at the finished approximate size, and when looking online, look for something that would also be that size. You also want to consider, if you were to make your own Afghan pattern, the stitchable space in each block. As you can see, this block on this 18 count fabric has a lot more stitchable space than the other. So you could do a more complicated pattern. I think this other baby Afghan fabric, alphabet Afghan fabric, would have to be something a little simpler. And I gotta tell you, this is real thin fabric. After doing the other video, I know you can sort of see my face through this one. It's real thin fabric and flimsy, and it would be fine to do for a baby. Also, and I did not do this, it doesn't have any stitched edge, so it frays really easily, and so you have to be really careful, because eventually you do want to sew a line into it and fringe it. This 18 count larger alphabet Afghan already has a line pre-sewn in it, so you don't have to fringe it. It's okay to leave it like this. I know some of you might do your own special thing to it, but for me, this being my first Afghan, I'm just going to leave it like this. I think it looks fine. So this brings me to the video, the last video, the one you guys won't see, which was hilarious. I thought it was very funny and wrong. I had wrong information. I assumed, because the pattern said 9 count fabric, that they gave her, my friend, a 9 count fabric. This is not, it's something like 14, but don't quote me on that, because I did the count size myself. So it might actually be a different count size, but it's not 9. So I did a whole just wrong information video, which took up some time. And so I feel like every time I've done something new for this Afghan, whether it be a Flosstube video, whether it be stitching it, what have you, I have had to do it over and over again until it is right before, or at least halfway right. You know, I'm happy with the finished project before I move on, and it has been a journey. It has really been a journey. So when stitching this pattern, another thing I had never done until I had an Afghan, you'll notice on this alphabet Afghan page, it tells you how many strands to go down, both over and down, as to where to place your letters. And that's helpful because it makes the letters evenish. And I had never done that before. And since I had never worked over 2 and never done that before, I didn't know if I was supposed to go over literally 1 thread or what would end up being 1 cross. So really that's 2 threads over. So it would be that amount times 2. But in all actuality, in this pattern particularly, it means 1 thread. So it says 56 over for A, and that's 56 threads over and 6 threads down. And that's approximately what this is. You are supposed to start here at the end. You can see this fabric has a border in it, and your 56 threads start at this thread just right outside this, right inside this border. I actually, on my threads that go over, started at the thread that's just under the woven in border, and I like the way it looks, so I just kept doing it. And you go, and I did start at the bottom of this woven in top border and went 6 threads down. And it recommends, and I've heard other people say this, You want to start on a thread that goes vertically and is on the front side of the fabric. So it's like almost like a lifted thread. So then after that thread's lifted, it goes back under the next thread. So you want it on the one that goes over to make sure your thread is secure. This particular pattern has you doing it with 4 strands of embroidery floss. So all of the main work is 4 strands of embroidery floss, and the back stitching is two strands of embroidery floss. So these blocks I have gotten A through M completely done. As you can see, those of you who stitch a lot will see that I have never back stitched. So A is the first time I ever really, in a large area, back stitched. It's also the first time I've ever worked with metallic thread, and this uses only DMC threads, so I am using the DMC metallic thread beyond the fact that it's what was given to me for free. It's the first time I've worked with any metallic. You will also see that in parts where they had fractional stitches that were the same color, I have just, instead of doing a half and a half, I've just done a whole cross stitch. I know it makes it a little bit bulky in those areas, but I like the way it looks. And in some of the children's hair, it is supposed to be some fractional stitching, and I didn't like the way it looked because you could see the fabric underneath it. So those of you who can see that, and I know you're there, that is why I made those choices. Also, besides doing the back stitching and not ever having done this is my project of first, there's also a lot of French knots. And I know everybody says they hate French knots, and I did too. But I'm starting to. Me and the French knots are on a speaking basis. I don't love them. Nope, didn't say that. But we're on a speaking basis. We're not friends. No, but we can maybe exist in the same place. This particular pattern here has so many French knots. Also, I want to draw your attention to the fact that each one of these letters, the first A took me probably the longest, notwithstanding the previous hot mess of starting and frogging this. But when I actually started it, starting from the beginning, A took me about 4 or 5 weeks to do, mainly because I was just getting used to the fabric, the orientation, all of this. And then once I did B in a week, down and done. So after that, they've taken me, for the animals, about a week. The little kids, these little humdinger kids, they take me about 2 weeks if I do them like every day, if I do a little bit every day. Because, I don't know if you can see all of this back stitching. F is the worst. Not my stitching on it, but the amount of back stitching that went into him. There's a whole bunch of colors. I think as far as colors went, the M, bless me. The M just had so many colors. This had, I know you probably see it, I have dogs who shed, but I love them. And one of my little stitching buddies, I tell you what, if I crochet an Afghan, and when I'm working on this, she just wants to lay under it. I don't know why. And she has to. She will make a stinker-roo. And you guys, I've always owned her. I've owned her from a puppy. So all I can say is it's my fault that she's so demanding. I do know this. This little M guy had so many colors. He had more of the color variation in him than any other block. But as I was saying, me and the French knot, we might be friends after this, or we might be friends who can do get-togethers sometimes. On this particular Afghan, I'm not going to show you any video or pictures of this. I am doing the sewing technique, meaning when I come up through the hole, the bottom hole on my left, and go through the top hole on my right, the needle goes directly into that bottom hole on the right. So I don't actually work on the back of the fabric that much. Only when you're starting and ending a thread would you be at the back of the pattern. And I'm liking it. I had never done that before. I told you, this is the first I had, like, drink some soda pop every time I say I have never. You will have a sugar rush by the end of this video. But I have never, ever done the sewing technique. And I can't actually sew. That's one of my goals this summer. I do have vacation for at least a couple weeks out of the summer, and I would like to learn how to sew. So I'm going to do that, but I don't actually know how to sew now, but it's called the sewing technique. So you don't have to know how to sew to do it. I'm also stitching in hand, which I had never done. Of course, I had never. And I'm not going to show videos of those. If you'd like to see a video of me doing them, I will take a video and attach it with my next Flosstube. I just don't know if people are interested. And I wouldn't say I'm an expert in either technique. I'm a novice at best at those techniques. I'm not really a novice stitcher. I've done some complicated stitching. I've done blending of threads and those type of things. And I've done French knots and back stitching. But I'm certainly not the best at all those things, but I surely can show you what I do, and if it helps you, and it might help you. So my videos, I'm going to try to be a little short with my videos. I don't know how much talking I'll do about my personal life. Maybe I will. I don't know. But I would like my videos to be kind of short. I also love it when people talk about on Flosstube their process of how they figured out how to fix a problem. For example, Latisha has a video that she made, and I will link, not just Latisha, I will link this video. That's how good I love this explanation of how she changed the skin color on one of her memorabilia. And I don't know that I'll ever need to do that, but I was thinking as she was explaining this to me, all this is wonderful knowledge to have, because I could just think of so many things I could do with this now. And I'm thinking, some things are more versatile than I thought they were. And so I just love that. I love it when people talk about the process they went through to come to a finished project or get through a particular problem, because it helps me sometimes, even if I'm not on the same pattern, think about what I might need to do or some options I might have to get where I want to go. So I hope my videos can be instructive and helpful. I also would like my videos to be helpful for people who don't necessarily cross stitch, and make cross stitching more accessible to more people. I feel like sometimes we get excited and talk in acronyms, and it's easy to get lost. And when I was first cross stitching again and I came up against some problems, some people, although some of those people I now enjoy, it was hard to really understand what they were talking about, although I desperately wanted to. So I'm going to try to explain what I'm saying. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have anything else about this Afghan that you might be wondering about, please let me know. This particular pattern, this ABC collection, I believe, is out of print. Sad face. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. And I am keeping mine for the foreseeable future. However, you might want to check on eBay. You could also check around in forums, because some people have told me, as I'm posting pictures of my work, that they have this pattern in their stash somewhere. And some of them may be like me, where they tried to do it and it was a hot mess. And it gets frustrating. I gotta let you know, it gets frustrating. I was more bubbly yesterday, I swear, when I was doing this video. I was really more bubbly and fun. So I can understand how some people might just say, I don't have time for that hot mess. So they might either give it to you or sell it to you if you ask if anybody has it and wants to get rid of it. These fabrics, in the last video, I called this the right fabric. I will put a link under right fabric, because you'll know it's 54 by 60. It is the right fabric for this pattern in the description for this video. I will also put a link, and they're both going to be from Joann's, because I definitely know those are these particular fabrics. Although you could buy these fabrics on other sites, so you can at least sort of see how they're described, so you can maybe find a similar item somewhere else. This baby Afghan fabric with the smaller stitchable size, I will also put a description for in the description of this video. The last thing I want to say is I do have a short blog. I don't have many entries right now. I try to participate in the WIPacolypse, which happens on the new moon every month. You just post your pictures on your blog of how you're doing. I will put a link to it. Come join us. It's a lot of fun. In the description, I also have, so I'll put a link to the WIPacolypse stitch along and a link to my actual blog in the description, along with my Facebook page. I know a lot of Flosstubers are using Instagram, and Instagram's a lovely thing, but I don't use Instagram for my floss tube stuff. I don't use it for my cross stitching stuff pretty much at all. I do have a public Facebook page for my projects in general. And if you'd like to see pictures of sort of each block coming along in progress, some of the later blocks I got less pictury. I think at the beginning I was just so happy to get a block done. Woo! Now I'm just so happy to get rows done. So I will also put a link to that Facebook page. It's a public page, like it, and you can see updated pictures of all of my projects. I will be doing Flosstube videos. I'm going to try to get one out a month. Maybe more, maybe less, depending on the time of year. And I would like to do one crochet video a month. So in these videos, in the Flosstube videos, you can expect, of course, cross stitching, because y'all know I do it. And I generally do lots of cross stitching. So it's going to be mainly just cross stitching. However, I have some projects that could fit more under needle work or bead embroidery. But if it uses floss, it'll come in this Flosstube video. In my crochet videos, anything that I use yarn for, so plastic canvas stuff and crochet, and I gotta tell you, I'm a novice crocheter. I'm even more novice of a crocheter than I would be a cross stitcher. So be warned. And I'm going to put all of that in those videos. So thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate you watching my video. Until next time, Flosstube, goodbye.